Yeah, I'm Batman. I just ate a protein bar out of a trash can. Kicked my uncle in the balls. Yeah, I'm Batman. I just ate a protein bar out of a trash can. Hot triple dude, that digitally large hands. The what? The what? What? You're not Jim. Jim's not Asian. You seriously never noticed? That's off to you for not seeing race. You didn't work here. You're not Jim. Oh, great. Can't wait. I mean, you are, but you are not Jim. This is Jim. Hmm. Oh, dude. How did... You're not Jim. Jim's not Asian. You seriously never noticed? That's off to you for not seeing race. You know something ridiculous is happening, and I'm going to tell you about it right now. This is Grandmaster Hikaru Nakamura, and he's playing in the Louisiana State Chess Championship. But there's just one problem. Hikaru is by far the highest rated player. Is Hikaru just farming lower elo players? No. Let me explain. You see, Hikaru is trying to qualify for the candidates turn, and one of the spots to qualify is the rating spot. But to be eligible, you need to play 40 games of classic chess. Hikaru's only played 18, and 40 minus 18 is 22. So Hikaru decided he's just going to play random tournaments to meet this requirement. Obviously, people had a lot to say about this, but in my opinion, there's a great saying. Don't hate the player, hate the game. What's your opinion on the situation? Let me know in the comments. Ridiculous is happening, and I'm going to tell you about it right now. This is Grandma.
Carl's chip because of severe flooding in downtown Miami, and it seemed hopeless. He thought this might be his final moment on Earth, so he did the only reasonable thing and grabbed his phone to film a TikTok video. And he was there with approximately 12 other members who all screamed while watching as the water level continued climbing and climbing, and its force was incredibly powerful, so they couldn't push open the entrance. But fortunately, they had plenty of protein bars available in the vending machines and avoided hunger. But after roughly 3 hours of being trapped there, the man filming suddenly realized they are surrounded by all these electrical equipment in a flooded space, which is incredibly hazardous. And
Guys, three cards that were removed from Clash Royale. The furnace got completely removed from the game, but it was replaced with the walking furnace. The heal spell got added in 2016, but got removed due to its low popularity and being super unbalanced. But it was replaced with the heal spirit 3 years later. But this next card is the most ridiculous one. It was added in June 2024 with temporary game mode. Goblin Queen's Journey. The Princess Tower acted as dark goblins, and the kingdom was now a goblin queen. They have threw baby goblins at the enemy. Fortunately, after the Goblin Queen's journey was over, the card couldn't be used at all. Supercell removed it 6 months later. It was the Baby Goblin's Tower card. Three cards that were removed from Clash Royale. Furnace got completely removed from the game, but it was replaced with the Walking Furnace. The heal spell got added in 2017, got removed due to its low popularity and being super.
The laptop RTX 2060, I'm pretty sure.
Upside down. Coal mining is the budget laptop from the previous video happens to have the slowest graphics card NVIDIA makes with RTX branding in the name. And in today's video, we're going to take that RTX branding and shove it down its throat. But before we get to that, if like me you spend most of your time in a game room and are suspicious that your gaming performance may be blunted by your own exhaust fumes, then today's video sponsor, the Aeronet 4 CO2 monitors for you. With its genuine NDIR sensor in it, you will get highly accurate CO2 measurements of your room. It's also conveniently color coded. When it's yellow, probably open a window. When it's red, you're likely dead. I think. It also comes with a handy app if you want to track your air quality. So get yourself an Aeronet 4 CO2 meter using the link in the video description. Now, the graphics card in question is the RTX 2050, a mobile GPU based on the same GA107 die in the RTX 3050. Except there are a few key differences. NVIDIA did cut the memory bus in half, something they're a huge fan of doing, and they also reduced the core frequency to hit lower power draw targets, leading to decently worse performance apparently. Something I will be confirming in this video by occasionally comparing it to this Asus laptop that has an RTX 3050 in. Now, comparing GPUs and laptops is kind of difficult because all the laptops have different hardware configurations. But if anything, the 2050 based laptops have the advantage here, so we'll see how it goes. Anyway, before we get to the testing, I did upgrade the RAM configuration in the HP laptop from the heatless single 8 stick to a 32 gig dual channel kit because, we want to be nice to the graphics card, give it a chance to succeed and all that. So let's get to the testing. So this is the best way to use a gaming laptop. I'm just going to switch its display over to the external one, and then I'm going to close it so that it's got perfect airflow. Cool. There we go. Ah, yes, we don't have a desk blocking our airflow anymore. Oh, that's not a great sign. You can just see its struggle to render them rays. Look at that. Motion blur is disabled. Wow. That's not what I was expecting to see there. But then things got weird. Oh, things are happening. It hasn't crashed. It is still technically running, I guess. Okay, that's what happens when you bring the menu back. Eventually, I just stuffed the game out with Task Manager, and when I restarted the game, it quickly recovered from its night terrors. Oh, that doesn't feel good. Let's bring up the ray tracing settings and no way, this performance is with the LSS on, and it's DLSS 3. Does that make sense that that's working on a 20 series GPU? I guess, because it is working. We do need more of it, though. That is doing a bit better. Granted, this is with lots of DLSS happening, but we're getting about 20 frames per second with our rays being traced. This is with performance DLSS. Things are looking quite spiffy. It it doesn't look like I'm growing hair on my eyes as much as normal. So I decided to try some ultra performance. Okay, so with ultra performance, like magic, we now have almost 50 frames per second with the ray tracing stuff happening here. And even at ultra performance, honestly, DLSS is doing a very good job here. Damn. Although it doesn't like movement near high contrast edges. That is some smearing. Okay, so once we're looking here, let's see what happens when we turn it off. Custom D just off. That's not going great, is it? 6 frames per second. It does look a lot better, though, I will say, if you don't move the mouse. Either way, depending on what's going on in the scene, Portal RTX has quite the DLSS implementation. But considering this non-upscaled result, I'd say no, the 2050 can't really ray trace. And the RTX 3050 in the other laptop did a decent bit better, giving us a very impressive 9 frames per second with no DLSS on. Nice. But with that, let's try some other games. I've gone to Yield Faithful Torture Tester Battlefield 5. This is a 1080p high settings. And with the laptop upside down, I mean, that is quite the thermal mod because instead of hovering around 100 degrees Celsius, the CPU is just hitting 83. So, yeah, I guess we all just use our laptops the wrong way around. Anyway, this is without ray tracing. So we're getting about 60 frames per second. In my experience with Battlefield 5, going to ray tracing, you usually lose about half your frame rate. Now, Battlefield 5 does have a very basic ray tracing implementation. It's not even global illumination, the loser. But either way, the 2050 is kind of managing. I don't know if I would recommend. Fine, David's not even in the call, so I'm just gonna step here. Roger, that's you right there. Big Davis in the AMK chat. We might get an easy victory. Yes, but it meets the minimum requirement for running, I guess. Let's turn it up to ultra. We went from about 34 to 29 frames per second. Wow, that's some beautifully reflected tree. The boat don't really do anything to the water. Okay. So here, we still get the sky just got in the way of it, but we still get beautiful tree reflections in the water. We get fire on our gun. Ooh, look at that. But we've not really lost that much frame rate, down from about 60 frames per second. So this is probably the high point. I don't think it's going to go better than this at any point for the remainder of the video, but I get to find out. Interestingly, the gap between the 2050 and its bigger brother is not as big in Battlefield 5 as I was expecting. I think it's because despite both laptops being in max power mode, the 3050 really wasn't drawing that much power, minimizing the difference between Cyberpunk at 1080p low setting is way more playable than it was at high settings in the last video. Go with that. Make it unplayable. Turn it on. And then we're going to do this, which is basically the lowest ray tracing setting that can happen. Yeah, about 20 frames per second is where it's evening out. So already not going very well. Okay, let's turn everything above path tracing on. Oh, yeah, the abuse is starting to settle in here. 15 frames per second, which I don't know. I feel like we haven't lost quite as much frame rate as I was expecting us to lose at this point. And remember, this is with the GPU running max power. That is as much power as the laptop wants to give the 2050. I guess we can still go further. We need to just do Psycho here on. That's as much ray tracing as can happen. And we're using that at 1080p low settings. Pretty funny. it's enjoying that a lot. It says 400 frames per second, but okay, yeah, no, that makes more sense. Zero. Ooh. Does it get used to it eventually? Is that a thing that's gonna happen? Now we're still stuck at 1 frame per second. I don't think it's really gonna go anywhere from there. But we're getting much better performance. You can tell by the frame latency. That it is. Whoa! Look at that. We've gone from almost 2,000 down to 700 milliseconds. Yeah, this is bad. I then outsourced some of the work to AI, hoping to get another frame or two. So there's a lot of AI technology going in making this run better now. It's in fact running 400% better than it was before, and this is with performance DLSS, which has made the graphics go all cartoony. Okay, I feel like maybe we need to do ultra. Is that, yeah, that's loads of. Oh, damn, that's. It doesn't like fast movement very much. But with ultra performance DLSS and psycho ray tracing, we're actually getting about 30 frames per second. Ooh. It looks like complete butt cheese. You know what? Ray tracing has nothing to do with making the game look better. It's all about the EP of pressing the psycho button and having your system be able to run it. And even with by far the least powerful RTX graphics card, it is playable with the Psycho box, but there was still one thing left to do for even more frame rate. Now the game's starting to look real nice. So this is the lowest resolution the game supports with ultra performance DLSS. So the actual render resolution is going to be like 3 by 4 pixels here. And yeah, I don't know. I don't think you can tell at all. This looks very good. Again, not a huge difference between these GPUs, but interestingly, with Cyberpunk, the 3050 is drawing more power than it was with Battlefield 5. I also want to give Quake 2 RTX a quick try because it's always hilarious how much frame rate you lose. We're currently sitting at 1,000 frames per second because this game is older than my grandpa. But then you go into graphics settings, you switch back to RTX, 30 frames per second, not even. Whoa. It does look so much better, though. I keep saying this, but I feel like this is ray tracing's best use case, is going back and making old video games all sexy. Oh, terrible things are happening on Fortnite. Ooh, at 1080p low settings with epic draw distance, Fortnite's doing some weird stuff. Real seizure here. So it's been a while and it's kind of evened out, and now we're getting a reasonable frame rate, but with big movements and stuff, it is still pretty stuttery. Anyway, let's turn on some ray tracing. Wow, DX12 makes Fortnite run like it's taking a jackhammer to the face. So now that the seizures are slowing down, the little 2050 is doing much better than I was expecting.
After Loki was out for a when lived clear, I didn't feel the congestion as much. Watery heights were not as.
And I think that it being able to handle Fortnite's ray tracing, it's like the most important thing it needs to handle. Because if you're 12 and you buy this laptop, you want to be able to shout at the other people in the lobby about how you're using Nanite's textured ray tracing settings, Lumen action. And then they're all going to be very impressed with you. And then you can tell them how your dad can beat up their dad because of your ray tracing. You just need to hope they don't have a 3050 based laptop. That'll be real embarrassing for you. I also wanted to try Control because I think this is one of the early ray tracing games. Depending on where we're looking, we're in the 50s. So yeah, I don't know. This 2050 is really not a very powerful GPU.
Geometry Dash and Roblox Obbies are some of the hardest games in the world to play and master, and their communities are actually quite intertwined. Geometry Dash is likely the second most played game in the pro obbing community. This also means quite a lot of Geometry Dash players, even including people like Zoink, have played pro obbing games like Eternal Tires of Hell. So this begs the question, which game is harder? Well, it depends on what you mean by harder. Okay, wait. Just to give some clarity, this video has technically been made, but many people were unsatisfied with the results of these videos. So I'm taking a completely different approach by splitting this matchup into 4 categories. getting people who are elite players in both Geometry Dash and Roblox Obbies to decide which is the harder game, who I will introduce you to right now. This is Green Bean 1421. Some of Green Bean's accomplishments in Geometry Dash include 90% on Slaughterhouse, 42 to 85% on Tidal Wave, and 100% on Zodiac. This makes Green Bean what we estimate to be a top 500 player in all of Geometry Dash. His accomplishments in Roblox Obbies include beating Tower of Impending Doom, Citadel of Infinite Void on 75 FPS, and Tower of Spiraling Fates. This makes him a top 10 Obby player in the world. This is Sebro. Sebro's accomplishments in Geometry Dash include 100% on Arcturus, 100% on Kinos, and 91% on Zodiac. This makes Sebro also a top 500 player in Geometry Dash. His accomplishments in Roblox Obbies include beating Tower of Impending Doom, Citadel of Infinite Void on 75 FPS, and the fourth last jump of Tower of Spiraling Fates. This makes him a top 20 Obby player in the world. And this is A6IQ1. A6's accomplishments in Geometry Dash include 100% on Deimos, 49 to 100% on Slaughterhouse, and beating Spectre in 3 runs. This makes him approximately in the top 400 Geometry Dash players in the world. His accomplishments in Obbies include beating Tower of Impending Doom, Citadel of Infinite Void, and getting to floor 5B on Tower of Void. This makes him a top 20 Obby player. Now, it may sound like these numbers for our players are inconsistent, but trust me, these are their rankings after taking more than just their accomplishments in the field, and they are accurate according to themselves as well. It may also sound like these guys are a lot better at Obbies than Geometry Dash, but with the Geometry Dash community being a lot larger, the difference is a lot smaller than it sounds. And because of that, these 3 are the best combined Geometry Dash players and Roblox Obbies in the world. Keep in mind, the entire script of this video has been run through all of these players. Make sure everything said is as accurate as possible. And finally, make sure to like and subscribe to this video. It took me quite a bit of work to put together, and only 2% of my viewers are subscribed. So subscribe now, and also share this to people who would find this topic interesting. Okay, without further blabbing, our first category is complexity. When it comes to Geometry Dash, it may seem like a simple game with simple mechanics, but this is only true to some degree. Geometry Dash has 9 different modes, the more prominent ones being Cube, Ship, and Wave. These modes are all controlled differently, meaning that a lot of players can be more skilled at the Wave than they would be at the UFO if they simply just play it a lot more. On top of this, every hard level has to be completely memorized, with some levels like Requiem or Killbot taking this to the extreme, being coined as memory levels, where you basically cannot see where you are whatsoever and have to completely memorize the entire layout of the level. But at the end of the day, Geometry Dash is a 2D platformer controlled by one singular input. Click. So it keeps its overall nature. If we compare this to Roblox Obbies, Obbies are a 3D platformer game where multiple inputs are used in every jump. WASD for movement, the spacebar for jumping, shift for shift blocking, the mouse right click to grab your camera like this, scroll wheel for zooming, and some lesser used keys like the alignment keys or the F key for corner flipping. And finally, the mouse, the most complex input. You can play obbies on different devices like mobile or controller, so their inputs look different, but currently PC players are the only ones who have really pushed the skill ceiling, as using PC is the most effective way to play obbies. To put this into perspective about just how complicated one jump in an obby can be, I'll do what is considered to be a hard but not a top jump in this Roblox obby called Tower of Lavender Luster, which happens to be the 23rd hardest tower ever beaten. But isn't a particularly hard jump within it, and this jump is infinitely easier than the jump you're seeing on your screen right now, for example. I'll have an input counter right here to show you how many individual inputs were made in order to complete this single jump. Yes, that took 21 separate inputs, including turns and zooms, many simultaneously at the same time. So, what's the main takeaway? Well, even if I ignore the complexity of the Roblox physics engine with all its weird glitches and whatnot, you can dance through walls, flip through walls, lodge, do whatever the hell this is called. We are comparing a 3D platformer with a multitude of inputs that are often simultaneous versus a 2D platformer with a single input, which is honestly not even a fair comparison because the 3D platformer would automatically be more complicated and it's not even close. So Roblox obbies are 100% more complex. Now, I may sound sort of biased towards obbies with all that yap I just talked about, but trust me, Geometry Dash is about to get glazed, and this portion was long for a reason, as we will be referring back to it. Our next category is preciseness. When measuring which game is more precise, we can use the previous explanation of the complexity of obbies. Let's assume we have an obby and a GD level that are the same difficulty and have the same amount of jumps. Let's say 200. For Roblox obby, since there are many inputs involved in landing every jump, this means that since these are theoretically the same difficulty, every individual input is not all that precise when you compare it to the inputs from the geometry dash level. In fact, it's not even close. The amount of precision a 2D platformer using one input needs to be equal difficulty with a 3D platformer simultaneously using multiple inputs is, to put it lightly, very high. The individual inputs for geometry dash in this case would easily be at least 5 times harder, if not more. So Roblox obbies being more complex actually works against it in the category, as Geometry Dash absolutely slaughters obbies when it comes to precision. Our third category is beginner friendliness, of which I actually have an example of a beginner of both games to show you. Our example is Bundun. Yeah, this funky guy with over 2 million subscribers. We'll compare how many streaming hours it took him to reach what we believe are around equal difficulty for a player who is equally skilled at both obbies and geometry dash. It being around high challenging and the easiest of easy demons. In this case, they are the Nightmare and Tower of Deep Darkness. So how long in stream time did Bundon take to beat this level and this tower? Well, he took a little over 9 hours for Geometry Dash. Beat the night. Not bad. But how long until he beat Tower of Deep Darkness? Oh, 45 hours. That's a lot more than it took him to beat the Nightmare, isn't it? Okay, wait. This is a little unfair because he did have some previous jump dash experience and he did make obbies. As his hardest before starting all of this was Jumper, a level ranked at the harder difficulty. But he was super rusty as well and said, "This was a year ago, bro." So I think this is generous. He will double the amount of time for his geometry dash time, even though the difference between Jumper and the Nightmare is much more than Stereo Madness and Jumper. And even then, the times don't even come close. Now, let's throw that example in the bin, even though it's pretty sufficient evidence. If we think about it, the more complex a game is, typically the harder it will be for a beginner to learn, get used to, and become good at, right? A game is more complex.
You get to your car. Just need to put your location in the trip planner. It recommends where you need to stop.
Our fourth category is going to be the current skill ceiling, or in other words, what is actually harder? The hardest obby, Tower of Whipplecorn, or the hardest GD level, Amethyst?
It's obviously Amethyst.
Well, it's not. Previous answer, I'll give some background. Geometry Dash started to gain mainstream attention when they released the 2.0 update back in 2015, and they've been mainstream ever since. Concurrent player counts in the tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands. So this community has had 10 years and millions of players throughout that time, on top of a very competitive community, all to push the skill ceiling to the game. So how does Pro Object compare? Well, We can mostly ignore all these joke obby games that aren't hard at all, like Tower of Hell and Slap Tower, and focus specifically on Eternal Towers of Hell, the most popular obby game, and tiered obbies. These were really small and underground and only started gaining any mainstream attention in 2018, but not a notable amount until 2020 after Tower of Hell flew up in popularity. When I say notable amount, I don't even mean 1,000 concurrent players at this time. They averaged around 300 to 750 from what I can tell. And even now, in 2025, all of these hard obby games in total amass to around 3,000 to 4,000 players on average. This still pales in comparison to Geometry Dash. We're not at their peak right now, still consistently get over 20,000 active players on Steam alone. If we take these stats and format it like this, I wonder which community would have the higher skill ceiling reached. Yeah, in case you didn't know, Amethyst, the top level in GD, is much harder than Tower of Level, the hardest obby in Roblox. I'm adding in an emergency fifth category last second, but this is just to clear something up. When it comes to the absolute peak difficulty both games can reach, well, it's completely immeasurable for both. Levels like Ton 618 and obbies like Pseudo Parallelodromus. Okay, I'm an elite obvious, and I can confidently say that whatever the hell that was is completely impossible for a person to pull off. These are both so far beyond human capabilities that even if we have chips implanted into our brains, we are never coming close to beating either. In short, both games can be as easy or as hard as you want them to be with basically no limits. In other games like Otsu or Guitar Hero. So both get a point here. I'm now going to cover some smaller subcategories. Things that aren't game changing, but still matter, and they will get half a point each. Nerves. Geometry Dash players suffer more from nerves as they're playing a non-stop game. And since their inputs are much more precise, nerves causing you to click even a single frame late can cause you to die. While in obbies, you can always take a second pause anytime you want. And we generally do not have the same non-stop gameplay that GD, nor are nerves as punishing in a lot of scenarios. Muscle memory. Geometry Dash requires more muscle memory, as once again, it's a non-stop game where you're basically memorizing the timings on when to click to beat a level. Obbies does not require this much muscle memory for almost anything. Luck/RNG. Obbies wins this by a landslide because the Roblox physics engine is one of the jankiest ever made. There's always a chance of something weird happening during your run. On top, there's always the chance of disconnecting mid-run and losing all of your progress. While these issues are non-existent in Geometry Dash, as its engine is much more consistent and the game can be played offline, so no disconnections. And finally, finger lock. Obbies usually have more issues with finger locking, as you quite literally just have more fingers to, well, lock. With most people using all five fingers on their left hand versus Geometry Dash with one finger, it's pretty obvious why obby players suffer finger locking more often. With that, that makes the scores 4-4. So, which game is harder? Well, it actually depends on how you look at it. If we compare the top players' skills for both games, then simply because of the fact Geometry Dash has had way more players, basically double the amount of time obbies have had skill ceiling, then it becomes obvious that Geometry Dash is a lot harder in that aspect. But if we go to the opposite end and look at someone who's a complete noob to both games, they're almost certainly going to have a much easier time with Geometry Dash, as Roblox's movement and mechanics are very hard to get used to and master, making Roblox much harder for beginners. Now wait, don't leave. We're actually having an exclusive interview with our top players here, Zero and Greenbean. So I'll remind you, Greenbean is a top 500 GD player and a top 10 obby player, while Zero is a top 500 GD player and a top 20 obby player. Unfortunately, A6 IQ1 wasn't on Discord when we did the interview, so he's not in it. But we are going to ask the other two some interesting questions about both communities, how they compare, I also have a listen on your experience as a pro of both games.
Royal Giant Masterclass. First tip, never go alone. Giant in front, archers in back. Clap.
Okay, guys, so even despite your numbers for hobbies sounding more impressive, which game are you guys actually better at and by how much?
So you're at, well, I'm obviously better at hobbies, like 100%, and definitely by far too. Mainly because I've been playing them since like April 2020, right? That's like almost 5.5 years. It's a long time. And I've been really consistently playing GD since like maybe late 2021. But even then, I haven't really been that consistent with it as compared to August. Like I probably have around 3 times the amount of play time in August as in GD. So obviously, I'm going to be a lot better at hobbies.
Um, for me, it's probably a bit harder to tell than it is for Green, but that's because Green kept on playing Ito before he went into GD. But for me, it was the opposite. I was playing GD, and then out of nowhere, I just kind of decided to go back to hobby since I had some experience like in 2020, but it's not much. And then ever since then, like now, I probably have around equal play time on each games. I would say I'm probably better at hobbies right now, only because even though I have honestly probably less time on hobbies than I do GD, since I have like over 3,000 hours in GD, I still think I'm better at hobbies just because the experience of getting better at GD definitely helps me a lot in hobbies. So even though we've established that hobbies is at least 9 times out of 10 harder for beginners, at what point do you think Geometry Dash becomes harder? Because we did establish that the skill ceiling for Geometry Dash is much higher.
Obviously, yeah, GD starts out a lot easier, but I think it starts to get a lot harder to progress in GD when you reach like maybe the mid extreme demon skill level. Like around levels like maybe Sonic Wave and Yatagarasu. Like levels where you're approaching the demon list, but you're not there yet. 'Cause when you reach that skill level, if you're just like an average player and you're not just extremely good at every single game you play, your charge is going to start to slow down a whole lot. And to really get anywhere above that and be pretty consistent with your progress, it's really hard to be able to do that. And that's why I think, it's just a lot harder to progress in GD at a later point than compared to hobbies.
I think I can agree with it, especially something I've noticed is I'll see a lot of players, like for example, hobby players who get to like maybe the low extreme demon skill level, like maybe people like that, and then they'll say that GD is a lot easier than hobbies, but I don't think they realize how much further GD goes compared to
Yeah.
hobbies. I can definitely see that. The top extreme demons are just way, way harder than lower extreme demons, right?
I think because people also think they're just like with Ox it's kind of consistent. Like in how just exponentially gets harder with each difficulty, but with GD it just stops at extreme demon. Like Cataclysm and Amethyst are the exact same rating, so maybe people just don't really understand that. They don't know that extreme demon is that big of a difficulty.
Maybe they need to change it at some point because it's kind of like it's weird.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why they haven't yet. They should.
Alright. So, if the hardest obby, Tower of Wigglecore, were to be placed on the demon list, where do you think it would place?
This is a question that I really thought of before, but I'm gonna stick to what I thought before. That TOID is probably around Slaughterhouse, and with the difficulty I think Wigglepore is, it's probably around maybe between Anathema or Avernus, or between Silent Clips of Anathema. So I think it's either 8 or 9 on the demon list.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So, on the contrary, what obby difficulty would Amethyst be, the current top one level, if we were to give it a difficulty? I kind of think of it as how close are we to the skill limit in GD, which is kind of hard to tell just because every once in a while, like for example, we kind of thought that we were close to it like years ago, but now new players are out progressing it a lot more. So it's kind of hard to tell because, in my opinion, I imagine the absolute peak of Unreal to be the human skill limit. So I would assume we're probably around high peak Unreal right now. The last question. If we were to theoretically stop improving in Geometry Dash altogether, how long do you think it would take for Roblox obbies to finally catch up to the skill ceiling Geometry Dash has reached as of right now in 2025?
So based off what I said earlier, that TOID is probably around Slaughterhouse. Slaughterhouse was verified by Doggy in December 2021, and that was almost 4 years ago now. So yeah, I'm gonna say probably around. I'll give obvious a little leniency, say maybe 3 to 3.5 years to catch up to GP.
Alright, guys. Thanks to Green Bean, Zebro, and A6IQ1 for helping me make this video. Make sure you check out their channels as they are really good at both of these games and whatnot. Links in the description. And make sure to like and subscribe to this video. Share it to other people you think would find it interesting. Peace out.
Power wiggle cord. I get it.
Today we're doing Cuphead Hater Percent, which is where you 200% complete the game with all bosses on expert mode, only the pea shooter for a weapon, no supers, no charms, no hit. Every boss must be S rank, and every run and gun level must be pacifist. This challenge was originally created by speedrunner the Mexican Runner when he kept getting people complaining about him using glitches in speedrunning, so we made a category that literally nobody could complain about. Now we'll start out by getting a coin from the tutorial and 3 from this person on the bridge, and then it's time for the root pack. Now to get an S rank on a boss, you need to take no hits, do at least 3 parries, use EXs 6 times, and beat the boss in under 2 minutes. So right at the first part, because these worms are very easy to parry, we can get our third one right there. It also gets us a lot of cards. Now we can just finish this guy out pretty easily. Next up is going to be the onion, and here's where we're going to use a couple of our EXs. And like I said, we can't use any supers because those are things you have to unlock. But the EXs do come in Cuphead's base moveset, and you do actually need to use them to S rank bosses. So those are going to be fair game. Now, finally, we have the carrot, which is probably the hardest one out of these guys. But to be fair, this is the root pack. It's the easiest boss in the game. So there's not too much to worry about. It does suck not having a spread shot in this fight, but overall, it is not too bad. And we just have to play kind of carefully before getting our knockout.
Then you can see we got our S ranks, so we can move on. And next up, we're going to have Ribby and Croaks. Now, this fight does increase the difficulty a little bit, and the main reason for that is that it's actually a little bit hard to get the time requirement. Like I said, you need to beat each of these bosses in under 2 minutes, and for this fight, that can go badly if you're not careful. So I'm really going to pay attention to trying to be fast, making sure we hit all of their attacks as soon as possible, and in this first phase, we are going to get our parries, since it's one of the only places where you can actually get them. Now, after dealing with a couple of those attacks, he's going to roll out, and we're going to have to deal with this attack where we just jump over the first one, duck under the other two, and we can keep fighting. Then he'll also use these ball attacks, which aren't too much harder. It's just about making sure you're never getting hit. Then after doing enough damage, they'll transform and become a slot machine, where for the coins, we just want to jump over a couple, go under a couple more, and hit the lever, where this time we got the bolt. Now for the bolt, this is probably one of the easier attacks. All you have to do is jump and drop. This used to be a pretty hard attack for me, but nowadays I get it done pretty easily. And for spin number 2, we got the ball again. And here is going to be the important part of trying to finish this guy off in only 2 cycles. If it takes more than that, you probably won't get it in under 2 minutes. And that's S rank number 2. Now we have our first running gun level. And like I said, this has to be pacifist. That means we can't shoot any of the enemies. But thankfully, we don't have to do this one no-hit. And that is very good because one of these running gun levels would actually be impossible if we did have to do it no-hit, which I'll explain once we get there. But for here, I still do have to focus on getting all the coins because even though we won't be using any charms or other weapons, we do have to unlock them, which is kind of sad. But here's where the level's going to start getting a little bit tougher because what we have to do is get one of these guys to throw a parryable ball, and then we can use that to go over the acorn maker. It's a little bit hard to get the timing, but we got it done. We can pick up our final few coins, and like you can see, that's going to be a P rank. Now we're on to Goopy, and Goopy shouldn't be one of the harder bosses, and honestly, he isn't. All he does is jump around. We just have to maintain our distance, and sometimes duck under his attacks. First phase, probably the easiest. Then once he transforms, this is where we're going to get all 3 of our parries, which is a very convenient place to get them too. And now for his big form, it's pretty much the exact same thing. Just go under certain attacks, duck under others. Now finally for his last phase, he turns into a gravestone, and we have to hit the face of the gravestone. All I'm doing right here is playing pretty carefully and trying to dodge out of the way whenever he does his head smash attack. It's honestly not that hard once you get the hang of it. And after just a bit, that's boss number 3 done. Don't worry, these S ranks will be getting harder soon. But not just yet because Hilda isn't too bad. For this fight, it's going to be our first aerial level, and that means we have a lot more space to move around. But there's also a lot more things that can hit us. And the big thing is going to be these green guys, which I want to take care of as soon as possible because they can't even shoot something that you can parry. The purple guys can, so we do want to keep them alive when we can. Then we will use the Bomb EX in this level since it came with Cuphead's original moveset, so it's fair game. And that's good because we will want to use it on this phase where she turns into like this Cupid guy because that's going to do a ton of damage and get rid of this phase pretty quickly. Then after we deal with all those arrows, we're just trying to stay away from all this stuff, trying to get as many parries as possible. The sooner you get the parries, the better. I really don't like having to worry about them too late in the game. Finally, Hilda starts freaking out and turns into a moon, which we'll use another Bomb EX on. And then she's going to start extending her face, and then these UFOs come down. Now for the red ones, you can just move past them, and for the brown ones, you have to bait them out. I've played this fight way too many times, so pretty easy win, but that might just be our last relatively easy S rank. Before we get onto the flower though, we have our next running gun, and for this one, it's very straight. I am super used to just completely murdering all these little guys because they're so easy to just shoot, get out of your way, not have to worry about them. But in this one, I actually have to be careful. And then once we get to the end, we get a coin. And then in this section, there are going to be these bugs. These guys are kind of hard to dodge just because they go all over the place. But we just have to maintain our distance, go up, dodge all the log attacks as well, and finally jump over that last thing where there's going to be this next coin. Now onto this last section, there's all these little guys who are holding leaves, and every time we stand on them, they get hit by a fireball. Kind of sad. But after we get our last coin, all we have to do is jump over this last person, and that's going to be the win with another P rank. Now, before we fight the last boss of Isle 1, we also want to do the Mausoleum. Sadly, we won't be able to use this super, but we still have to unlock it. Now it's time for the fight that everybody was waiting for. Flowey on expert mode, and this fight is terrible. When you're playing expert mode at the start, Flowey just spams this one attack where he spawns all his different creatures. And the most annoying one is the pink one that you can parry. If we don't parry one of those guys, they can very easily kill you. So I try to parry them as much as possible, especially because I do have to get 3 parries anyways. But we're trying to just get as much damage as we can, and we actually got through it pretty quickly. Then on to his second phase, he finally uses other attacks. And compared to the first phase, this part is super easy. Then finally, Flowey gets super angry and starts spawning roots towards all the platforms, which isn't too bad. All we have to do is just pay attention, make sure that nothing's going to hit us from below. This boss did take me quite a few attempts, but we got him done, and that's also Aisle 1 done. Well, besides one last point we'll pick up right here. Now on to Aisle 2, and the difficulty stays very high up because now we have Bon Bon. Now she starts with her candy attacks, and these can be a couple of different things. For the first one, we got this candy corn who keeps going in different directions. We also have to pay attention to the little pink guys that sometimes spawn and parry them because they're pretty much the only things you can parry in this fight. Next up, we got the chocolate guy or waffle guy. I still don't know exactly what it is. One of the easier guys, just gotta keep your distance. And finally, we got the gumball. I do not like the gumball, especially in expert mode because he has 2 guys trailing him instead of just one. So I did get a parry right there, which was really nice. But other than that, I just want to keep my distance, stay away, use some EXs when I can, and got him done as well. We also got our third and final parry right after he was done, which was really nice. And now it's time to take care of Bon Bon, which this phase is terrifying, especially when you have to beat the level no hit because she spawns her heads and this gumball, which gets rid of the ground. And sometimes she can spawn 2 heads at once. This is also a fight where you kind of have to pay attention to time. It is easy to not get the 2-minute time requirement here if you're not careful, but I didn't have a problem with this one. Another hard fight done. Now we'll save the barber guy over here because that's another requirement in this run before our next running gun level, which this is the running gun, which would actually be impossible if we couldn't take damage during them. Now it starts out with our trampoline boy, which I absolutely love this guy. He's just so adorable. Then we make it past all these guys rolling on balls, stuff like that. But after that section, we get to here, where first of all, there are going to be all these guys who are just hanging on these ropes. We can't shoot them. So we have to do a very precise movement to go in between one of them. And then we're going to take damage during the second one so we can go through the cannons and get through that part without shooting anything. That is super precise. It took me so many tries to get, and I do not want to do it again. After that, there's also going to be this little boss guy who we're going to have to take damage to again. So now we have to play perfectly. And this is a very hard section to play perfectly in because you're going to have all these pretzel guys who are jumping up and down and a hot dog that is shooting condiments. So I very much take my time in this section. I have lost way too many runs to this part, and this is a terrible level to have to redo. Then finally at the end, we have to do a perfect jump right over the hot dog and just barely make it over him without getting hit, which makes this definitely one of the most stressful P ranks in the run. Now on to Wally, and this is a boss that surprisingly is very difficult. Now the first few phases aren't too bad. In this first one, we want to pay attention to parrying all the pink birds and just dodging all Wally's attacks, just like usual. Then for his second phase, right away we'll use the Bomb EX, and then it's pretty much just more or less dodging some things. This attack seems pretty intimidating, but it isn't too bad. Then on to his third phase, he turns into a little guy, which we want to stay up close and personal to him. That way we can get as much
Stay tuned to see the hits and misses. Don't forget to subscribe for more transatlantic fashions.
I'll do like 3 more times. Holy bad ending. Yeah, no, I'm gonna quit.